Ashes of Creation. Is it finally happening, or is this going to be another Star Citizen situation where my grandchildren are going to be able to play it with the squad after spending 5 million on the in-game cash shop?
All right, well, I almost can't believe this, but yes, it is finally that time. 7 years after the Kickstarter first went live, we are just about to get our hands on Ashes of Creation. Now, mind you, the game isn't fully releasing into 1.0 or anything, far from it. It's still Alpha 2 to be.
Oh, those birds, far from it. I honestly don't know what to expect. Either we're getting this game in like 2 years or 20 years. There's no in between, it seems like.
Exact. But for all intents and purposes, launching or not, Ashes is basically here because starting in a few days, the game will be publicly available with no NDA and holding playtest each and every single week. This begins with 3-day weekend test beginning this Friday, followed by phase 2 when the servers will be up and running about 5 days every week, and then come phase.
People are gonna be so pissed when these tests launch, honestly. There's gonna be bugs, there's gonna be problems. People are gonna be real mad.
3 in a few months from now, they'll be up 24/7, at which point might as well be like an early access launch, not technically, but in the sense that if you wanted to play Ashes of Creation every waking hour of your life, you will absolutely be able to pay money in order to do so. Now, I've not really covered this game at all in the past couple of years, and if you're wondering why, well, frankly, it's because I've got a bit of Kickstarter MMO fatigue. I have grown tired of spending time and energy thinking about games that are still 5+ years away, and it doesn't help that pretty much every crowdfunded MMO I have ever followed hasn't turned out very well, either launching and failing or perpetually stuck in development hell. I am still
Most of those things are horrible, well, cash grabs, honestly, at the very end, so it's understandable.
legitimately upset about Crowfall. Like, I had so much hope for that game. Anyway, Ashes of Creation is hoping themselves to lift this Kickstarter MMO curse and be the first one of these games that doesn't flop. And since we'll be playing it in just a couple of days, I just wanted to catch up on how things were going. So I started looking up the latest updates in the game, reading blog posts, watching videos and discussions. And then to my surprise, just a few days ago, they lifted the verbal NDA, meaning that anyone who's taken part in recent closed alpha tests, of which there have been a few for the past few months, they can now share their thoughts. And well, those thoughts have been a bit of a mixed bag. Surprise, surprise. So for starters,
Pretty much as everything that has been Ashes of Creation the past couple of years, we're literally back, boys. It's over. We're literally back, boys. It's over. We're so back. Dead. It's been a ride. It has been a ride.
we've got quite a few videos from the Ashes of Creation enthusiast out there. I'm talking about the content creators who have channels dedicated mostly or exclusively to this game. On average, their impressions have been fairly positive. On the list of
Well, overall, yeah, I would agree with that.
positives and good stuff, it includes the combat, which does seem to be in a good place with a solid foundation. The game, if you don't recall, is using a hybrid system, a mix of action and tab target, something akin to like a Guild Wars 2 or Throne in Liberty. Most of the feedback that I've seen has said that the action feels better on the melee classes, like the tank and the warrior barbarian class, fighter
Makes obvious sense, yes.
as they're calling it, while the tab
Action combat is action combat's pretty good, but the moment you require precision aiming with a skill in action combat, instantaneously just turns to shit.
targeting seems to be much preferred for the ranged and caster classes. Speaking of classes, there are 6 archetypes in the game as of Alpha 2. From what I've seen, it looks like each of these has a strong identity with some interesting class abilities and lore behind them. We've got the Bard, Cleric, Fighter, Tank, Ranger.
Yeah, they made the bard. We recently watched that. They made the bard look pretty decent, not gonna lie. Seems fun, seems okay, definitely, and seems unique, which is probably the most important part. You know what I'm getting tired of currently in MMOs? That you don't have a class and you equip weapons and that's it. Man, the moment they start doing one thing too much, it gets really boring. First, it was World of Warcraft, and you pick a class, you play the class, each class has skills, doesn't matter what weapon you use, And then other MMOs started popping up that, well, the classes were not unique in the slightest, that it all just blended into a puddle. Then Guild Wars came effectively. Not really the story and lore of the MMORPG, but you get the point. Guild Wars, where you swap weapons based on class, you have different skills, and then a bunch of games also started doing that in a shitty way. And, well, now we're back to World of Warcraft. Each class is unique, but but the Ashes of Creations with different weapons. It's as long as it's unique. Honestly, I don't care what system you're using. I think having a class and a class identity is very cool, and I am a fan of that. But I don't care about, honestly, at this point. Do you change skills with weapons, or what happens?
And the mage. Pretty good feedback from pretty much all of them. The visuals have gotten progressively more visually interesting, partially due to their shift to Unreal Engine 5, and to coincide with visuals, the world and the environment, it's a lot more fleshed out and interesting as well. And I thought the same myself, like watching some of the recent videos for Ashes of Creation, specifically that most recent showcase of the Lionhold area, which is like the starter zone. I thought it looks cool, looks fleshed out, had some interesting points of interest there, had some interesting verticality, some cool like landscape stuff going on. So
interesting points of interest. Very interesting indeed.
Yeah, I think the world looks good in terms of its visual presentation and the stuff that they're putting within it. And then one other big positive that pretty much each and every one of the content creators pointed to was the update cadence as of recently, saying that in the past couple of months, they have been updating the game at quite a high frequency, with patches coming out on a regular basis, fixing, improving, and adding things to the game. Now, it might be easy to write off these enthusiast channels because, hey, yes, they've got YouTube channels dedicated to covering an unreleased MMO that looks to be still at least 4 years from launch. So of course,
I'll literally just say Narc. Everyone knows you're talking about Narc.
They're going to be positive. At the very least, they like the game enough to have channels dedicated to the game.
Everyone knows everyone is only talking about Narc when we're talking about unreleased Ashes of Creation and Cope.
Right? But no, it wasn't all positives just because of that. We did get a fair bit of critique in these videos as well, mostly pointing to the fact that it's an alpha, and with that has all the expected alpha issues, which include bugs, glitches, performance, and a general lack of polish. The bugs are a big one from what I've seen, things just not working properly, that including quest, public events, NPCs bugging out, all of which seem to be still occurring on a regular basis. Performance and server
Yep, we literally expected this.
stability issues are cropping up a lot as well, even in the recent test, which have a much smaller number of players than what we expect to be in the coming weeks. Performance and server stability has still been an issue. Now, with that said,
Yeah, this makes sense, because Ashes of Creation did one thing that no one expected, and it makes no financial sense whatsoever. Well, they now have reverted that decision to a degree, and people have been pissed about that also. But initially, to play in this early, you needed to spend 200 something, $50 or something like that, to get into this thing. And Ashes of Creation decided, yeah, you can no longer buy these 200 keys. So yeah, because we server costs expensive. Dude, for $200, if people spend 200 to enter your game, I'm pretty sure that covers probably all the server costs that you could ever want. And they decided to just stop selling those keys for whatever reason. And again, the reason was server costs, which doesn't make any sense at all. And turns out most likely that is because the server stability is non-existential. And that's going to be a really interesting thing that happens when people are actually en masse able to log into this game. Will the servers just implode? Is it going to be a worse situation than Magic the Gathering Arena? Probably not, because that game is supported by a half-moving hamster wheel and a dead hamster. But we're going to see.
with the regular clips of updates mentioned in the positives, people have been saying that the performance and server stability has been getting better over time. I guess one question, though, is the performance and server issues smoothing out as there are less players, or because of the patches making back-end improvements? Time will certainly tell. Now, and one big negative, and this is going to, I think, get a lot of people who are potentially considering purchasing into these early tests, is the content. In terms of the actual amount of content in the game, the number of quests, quest, the areas of points of interest, the places to explore, the dungeons, the world bosses. Simply put, there's not much in the current build of the game that we're going to be playing shortly. In fact, it looks like in this alpha build, you're going to be spending a majority of your time just grinding mobs. There are quests in the game, they do exist, but they're pretty lackluster in terms of the experience rewarded. That is if they don't bug out in the process of you doing them, which apparently is happening. In fact, some are saying that in this test right now, in the Alpha 2 test, that it has even less content than Alpha 1. I don't know how that's possible, but I've seen some feedback that that is the case, and that was the test, mind you, from 3 years ago. In fact, one creator said that the game right now feels like much more of a survival game than a traditional theme park MMO in terms of the amount of structured content that's available for you. Now, to be fair, that's sort of the whole idea anyways, because the game is heavily modeled after ArcAge, and ArcAge was a blending of theme park and sandbox elements, and I presume this is going to be the way as well. It's just that right now it seems to lean more into the sandbox nature, in that you're making your own fun, because that guided fun isn't so much there currently.
Well, to be honest, Ashes of Creation is not supposed to be guided fun at all. Ashes of Creation is EVE Online, but for the unwashed masses, effectively, to a very, very high degree how it's going to work. And at the end of the day, it's going to be very interesting, because one of the reasons why I am interested in Ashes of Creation is because when this game launches, every single thing the developers have made and balanced is going to get literally just thrown out the fucking window. Probably in 5 hours, not less. Okay? When this game launches, there's literally going to be day one guilds that are 2,000 members large. People expect this. This game is going to work effectively exactly like EVE Online. And that is a good and scary thing at the same time. It's good because that's going to be very interesting on how the backstabbing battles, political intrigues between players happen. And scary because, well, EVE Online is complicated. Ashes of Creation is not going to be that complicated, but we're going to see. EVE Online has many, 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 many stories.
And then one point I also saw brought up quite often, which might be a good or bad thing, depending on the type of player you are, is that the game is not solo friendly. Not at all.
Yep.
For the most part, you are going to want to group up with people to do a lot of things. If you're hoping to level efficiently and grind efficiently, you can play solo. It's just that you're probably going to be out quite a bit behind players who are working in groups. This is a group-focused game. The level of difficulty in terms of how easily it is for solo players to kill mobs, to clear content, to get things done, it is tailored and aimed at being better in a group. So again, positive or negative depending on the type of player, but that's the kind of game they're trying to make. This isn't like a thing. It's not like they were trying to make a solo friendly game and they've ended up not delivering on that and have a group focused game. No, they're trying to make a group focused game. It's just, again, something they should be aware of, because whether or not people like to admit it, it seems like a lot of the MMO audience has kind of shifted in the direction of wanting to have more solo ability in their MMOs. I'll just say personally, I can be pretty antisocial. Even in video games, I don't always like grouping up with people and chatting with people, but I still see the appeal, and I actually enjoy when MMOs push you in that direction. I've thoroughly enjoyed games that have that focus.
Yeah, MMOs are honestly the best played with people. Without it gets stale real fast.
I will still might go off in my own section and do my solo thing for a good chunk of time, but I like when there's content and hurdles in the way that makes you work with other people. And I'm just okay with being behind the people who are grouping up if I want to solo. Like, that's just how it is, right? Now, probably one of the most critical videos that I saw from one of these enthusiast channels came from Rive Genesis. Beyond echoing many of the above concerns, he also really leaned into just how little game they have to show, or rather how little actual content they are presenting to the public after having spent 8 years in development. Now,
yeah, and this is kind of red flag to a huge degree, because for the amount of content that they are showing, it doesn't make any sense. Considering they have said that they have stated there's a lot ready. All the zones are pretty much finished and whatnot. But for the amount of content that they are showing here, seems slightly sus, kinda. Well, they are claiming that pretty much everything is finished. All the zones, all the things, and, you know, the biggest chunks of it at the bare minimum. And yet we see so little. That feels kind of strange to a lot of people, and that's understandable.
Although he was the most critical throughout his coverage, he also had a lot of positive things to say, and generally it seems like he is still interested and planning to play the game. And also, his criticisms came across as pretty fair to me. It's clear that he's played a bit of the game, and I don't think he's wrong in many of his assessments. I think in particular, his discussion of the development timeline and how much longer we're expecting it to take, I think he's spot on. Even myself, just like perceiving this game casually from the outside up until recently, where I decided to check out some content and see what's going on, even just looking at streams occasionally every couple of months, I was like, yeah, it seems like this game is still at least 3 to 4 years away. And it seems like that might still, in fact, be the case. Now, if you're interested in seeing the full coverage from any of these creators, I've linked all referenced videos below. Highly recommend checking any of them out. These are people who have been actively following and playing the game. And yeah, for the most part, they all had generally positive things to say, with a lot of the same regular, consistent negative points of feedback. That being that there are quite a lot of bugs, performance and server stability, despite improving, still isn't great. There is a general lack of content.
Oh no, dude! I think even Luke Stephens would probably say that yeah, there's a lot of bugs in Ashes of Creation, and that's something, okay?
And again, the group focus, but that's not necessarily a negative. That's intentional. That's by design. So yeah, check out their videos. That's all linked below. The conversation in places like Reddit has leaned a bit more generally negative. What a
Well, why would you ever go on Reddit? Do you want to lose brain cells?
shocker. Take this quote, for example. Apparently, only around half of the Riverlands, one zone out of the many that were promised, is aesthetically completed, and the zone is pretty empty as far as content goes. Some are saying it's as bad as Pantheon. Okay. They're really coming out with the big guns here, hurling out the major insults. Similar here is this quote that says, most of the complaints I've noticed come across my feed have been people expecting the game to be around 50% complete, when in actuality, it's only around 20% complete. Most people thought the game was closer to being completed, but with the current state of the game, I think there's
Yeah, again, with the things that they have said themselves, the developers, about Ashes of Creation, it's really mixed signals. From some of the things that they say, you think the game is almost like 80% complete at times. Then they say something else, and it seems like, oh, wait, we're 20 years away from launch at this point. Then it's like, oh, half of the game is complete, and then it's no. It's so hard to tell how actually complete the game is.
Concerns the development could still take many more years. I mean, I don't think we even have to speculate about this. We're entering Alpha 2. It is still going to take many more years. They are launching a test for the game that only has a portion of a single zone, when they've promised many, many more zones in the final iteration and many more systems and features that they are just not comfortable with presenting.
Yeah, but systems are also almost complete to a degree. It's so hard. It's so hard to tell what's real and what's not
To the public for testing sake. We're obviously still years away. That's without question. And then a follow-up to that was someone saying that they have one single biome, map/zone, at 20% completion, the exact percent, whatever. They were supposed to be 18 biomes in the game. Almost none of the announced systems have been developed in any way whatsoever. Everything is in a worse state than Alpha 1. You know, I don't know whether or not we can assess.
I don't even know if that's a true statement.
Whether or not any of these systems have been developed or not. They probably have in some capacity, but at least they've not been developed to the point where they're being rolled into these builds that we're about to pay to test. I've already played Ashes of Creation myself, having taken part in alpha testing a few years back, and looking at that content that I made about 3 years ago, although the game was lacking content, it was very much still an alpha, as it still is today. Even that being the case, I did enjoy my time. My ultimate takeaway was that while the game still obviously had a ways to go, I liked the general framework of what was there. Some key highlights being that I enjoyed that early iteration of combat. Apparently that has only gotten better since. I thought the performance was good, both the local performance of the game running on my PC, but also the server latency. All of that was pretty smooth. When
I see the animations, I'm literally getting Anarchy Online vibes. Yeah.
I played. I also liked the world. I liked exploring it. I enjoyed the scale of everything. I saw some interesting points of interest and environments, and the whole player-built cities were cool, that even such an early iteration of it that we saw in that alpha test. Funny thing though, going back and rewatching that video, near the beginning of it, when discussing the game's current state, I said at the time, it is clear that it's still very early in development. My guess is it probably needs another 2 to 3 years minimum, just based on what we saw this weekend. And what's funny is I got a bit of pushback for that statement, but here we are a full 3 years later, just about to enter Alpha 2, with the launch still on the distant horizon to be determined. So yeah, turns out
the real question is, how many more times are they gonna sell something that's $200? That's the real question, okay?
it was correct. In fact, I'm going to go out on a further limb and say, from everything I've seen leading into this upcoming test, looks like they're probably still another 2 to 3 years away. In fact, I'm going to just push it out further and say they're probably 3, 4, or 5 years away from like a full...
Yep, I will maybe be able to play this as a decrepit old man with the boys in my retirement home. What a time to be alive.
Full 1.0 actual release of the game. That's how it seems anyway. So in terms of the Alpha 2 testing, here's how it's going to go. Phase 1 is starting October 25th. Now, that's only for prior tests.
No one who has followed Ashes of Creation, by the way, trusts anything that they do and label a date on it. Because they have had so many dates that they have pushed back at this point. It's more it's easier to point out the things that they haven't pushed back than the things that they have, okay? And I'm not sure if there's anything that they have actually not pushed back at this point. It's kind of insane.
Like if you bought into prior testing or you were a Kickstarter backer, you can start playing later this week. But if you are buying these Wave 1 keys that they're selling right now for $120, you actually don't get access until 2 weeks from then, starting on November the 8th. Now, in this whole phase, they're going to be doing weekend tests. The plan is to run the servers from Friday to Sunday. So 3-day test with 4 days off, and then another 3 days, and then 4 days off. And the whole focus here is on the technical side of things. We're talking the scalability, the stability, the performance, and the progression on these servers. And then phase 2 is happening 2 months from now, starting on December 20th. At this point, they're going to be going from 3 days of testing to, they said 5+ days of testing. So like 5 or 6 days per week, the servers are going to be available with 1 to 2 days downtime. In this, they're going to start adding more content, things like node advancement systems, working on the economy and the vassalling system. And then phase 3 is starting in May. On May the 1st is when they have it tentatively listed. And at that point, the plan is to have the servers up and running 24/7. This is when they're really going to start expanding the content and features of the game, or so that's what they're saying as of their current roadmap. Now, after all of this here, I will say that I am genuinely looking forward to playing this game again. I'm going into this alpha knowing that the game is incomplete, that it is going to have a lot of issues, and that the servers are probably going to be a total mess, maybe this entire first weekend even. But once that irons out,
the first weekend is going to be a disaster. It's going to be hilarious. Anyway, that was Forge Gaming 10 out of 10. Bye.